Hello everyone, this is Remlays from 40k Theories, and welcome to this new episode of 40k Lore for Newcomers. For this episode, nominated on Patreon by Overscore, we will be taking a brief look at the events of the Spinward Front. This video will be a brief overview for certain events that may be explored in greater depth within additional videos in the future. So without further ado, let's begin.
Out here, beyond the periphery, the void itself burns. Some say it's the flames of dying stars, others that it's the fires of war that consume the entire region. Me? I know it's the flames of hell that burn on that Spinward Front, and they'll take us all before they're extinguished.
The Spinward Front is the name given to a series of war zones spread across multiple planetary systems, which are predominantly both within and beyond the periphery subsector, located at the northernmost point of the Calixis Sector. Across the vast expanse of the Spinward Front, the forces of the Imperium are forced to combat against a multitude of highly dangerous foes, both human and Xenos alike, as they desperately attempt to maintain control and reassert Imperial dominance over the region. While the Imperium has fought desperately throughout the region to regain its authority, it remains hotly contested between the various factions involved. The secessionists of the Severan Dominate seek to obtain control over the subsector for themselves, while a vast Orc War, led by the war boss Grimtooth, embarks on a seemingly unstoppable campaign of carnage and destruction. The cruel and insidious Drukhari, seeking to take advantage of the ongoing confusion, have begun plundering countless worlds for slaves, whilst the forces of chaos, led by Sector of the Thousand Suns, have launched numerous invasions of their own throughout the subsector. Despite the Imperium dispatching an ever-increasing number of Astra Militarum regiments to the Spinward Front with each passing year, it appears that the worlds of the periphery subsector will remain a site of intense conflict for the foreseeable future. But which faction will claim ultimate victory within this theatre of war? Only time will tell.
Whatever happens, we have got the Emperor's blessing. They do not.
In early M39, Lord General Militant Goldener Angevin of the Astra Militarum would be granted the honour of leading a crusade into the depths of the Calixis Expanse in order to liberate and conquer the worlds that lay within. Following the destruction of a vile Xenos race known as the UVAF and the scouring of their Hell Worlds, the Calixis Expanse would finally belong to the Imperium, where it would be officially redesignated as the Calixis Sector. In the wake of this crusade, several dynasties of rogue traders, individuals that serve as an amalgamation of explorer, colonialist, and merchant, would make their way to the sector in order to conquer and rule these now liberated worlds in the Emperor's name. One of the most successful dynasties to settle within the Calixis Sector would be the fledgling House Severus, ruled over by Duke Severus I. House Severus would bring both stability and prosperity to much of the periphery subsector by purging a number of Xenos and heretical warbands, as well as discovering a number of stable warp routes throughout the region. In secret, Duke Severus sought to utilize his immense wealth and political reputation to establish his own personal independent fiefdom within the subsector. Severus's plans would ultimately be eclipsed due to the achievements of one man in particular, Lord General Militant Drusus, who had inherited command of the Angevin Crusade following the mental breakdown and subsequent death of Goldener Angevin during the later years of the war. While Severus sought to obtain glory purely for his own benefit, Drusus by contrast fought for the Imperium itself, and would continue leading the forces of the Astra Militarum into battle. A host of decisive victories against a multitude of alien foes gained him glory, fame, and immense popularity amongst the Imperial populace. Following his supposed death and apparent resurrection as a living saint, Drusus would go on to be celebrated as the patron saint of the Calixis Sector, where he would be viewed as the very embodiment of the Emperor's justice. He would even be named as the First Lord Sector of Calixis, an act that would ultimately scupper the plans of House Severus. Severus I would view the rise of St. Drusus as coming directly at the expense of his house, resulting in the dynasty bearing a grudge against the Imperium for centuries to come. In late M41, Duke Severus XIII, still harbouring his family's now deep-seated resentment towards the Imperium, would begin concocting his own plans to amass power within the region. To this end, Severus would forge an alliance with a Drukhari cabal known as the Children of Thorns, where he would provide the Xenos fresh stocks of slaves in exchange for their services. The Drukhari would begin launching a series of assaults against a number of worlds throughout the Periphery subsector, while Severus would ensure that Imperial forces would be unable to intervene, allowing Severus to slowly and subtly begin annexing these worlds into his now steadily growing empire. Despite this ever-increasing power and influence, Severus remained cautious. Not only did the Duke take great care in ensuring that his dealings with the Drukhari remained secret, but he also made sure not to openly declare secession from the Imperium in hopes of avoiding Imperial retribution. And yet, while Severus began preparing to make a stand against the Imperium, the first true challenge to his rule would come from an altogether different source.
Orcs is made for two things: fighting and winning.
With little to no warning, a massive war, the Orcish equivalent to an Imperial crusade, would begin making its way into the Periphery subsector. This war, led by the war boss Grimtooth the Gitslaver, would cause untold carnage and destruction throughout the subsector, burning and pillaging countless worlds in the process. The planetary defense forces upon these worlds, which were geared primarily to put down potential civilian uprisings and rebellions, were woefully unprepared to stand against this new and unexpected threat. As a result, they would frequently be overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and raw brutality of the Greenskins. With the Drukhari providing little to no support against the Orcs, and seemingly abandoning him altogether, Severus would reluctantly turn to the Imperium for aid, after having exhausted all other options. Severus would dispatch a number of messengers to the hive world of Scintilla in order to beseech the current lord of the sector, Marius Hax, for assistance. While most of the envoys sent by Severus would mysteriously disappear, or fall victim to some unknown calamity, Severus's granddaughter would successfully reach Scintilla and inform Hax of the Orcish threat. Hax, who was somehow aware of Severus's plans to create a fiefdom, had initially allowed the Orcs to run unchecked throughout the Periphery in order to both humble and oust the treacherous Duke. However, Hax would come to admit that it was ultimately in the Imperium's best interest to quash the Greenskin threat, and would begin mobilizing a number of local Astra-Militarum forces from throughout the Calixis Sector to drive the Orcs back. But while Imperial forces would succeed in liberating Kulf, the capital world of the Periphery, the Orcs would prove to be far more difficult to expel from the region than initially anticipated, resulting in a stalemate between the two forces. Not only were the Greenskins an incredibly stubborn and tenacious foe, but Lord Hax had failed to commit a sufficient number of troops to combat the Xenos, as much of the sector's military was committed to fighting throughout the Jericho Reach. This would result in additional worlds throughout the Periphery being captured, plundered, and burned by the Orcs.
If you will not serve in combat, then you will serve on the firing line!
While the Orcs would undoubtedly prove to be the most immediate threat to the subsector, the Greenskins were not the only foe faced by Severus's forces. Seeking to take advantage of the confusion across the Spinward Front, the Drukhari would launch countless slave raids against the Periphery worlds despite the various pacts that they had forged with House Severus. With the region teetering upon the verge of collapse, another of humanity's foes would enter the fray. A traitor Legion warband led by the Thousand-Sun sorcerer Sektov the False Whisperer would also begin assaulting a number of worlds throughout the Periphery. While the exact reasoning behind Sektov raids remains unclear, it has been highly speculated that the sorcerer seeks to recruit as many Psykers as possible into his warband's ranks, in addition to the simple acquisition of resources. with threats besetting him from all sides, Severus would choose this moment to annex those worlds both within and beyond the periphery, officially creating what would become known as the Severan Dominate. Upon learning of this act, Marius Hex would become enraged and would declare Severus to be both a secessionist and a traitor before moving his own forces against the Duke. This has led to what is now effectively a five-way conflict between the Imperium, Severan Dominate, Orcs, Drukhari, and the forces of Chaos, causing untold havoc and devastation throughout the subsector. Grimtooth especially has begun the second phase of his campaign of conquest, as the Orc is no longer content with simply looting worlds, but is actively enslaving them, forcing the populations of those worlds under his heel to produce weapons and munitions for his forces. The Spinward Front continues to be a hotbed of conflict even to this day. And that concludes this edition of 40k Lore for Newcomers. If you liked this video, consider supporting us on Patreon for more content. To those that are new to 40k, we hope you learned something. So leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.